Hello and welcome to the Mary Grace Show. I am Mary Grace, the voice of sanity to help you navigate politics, culture, wellness, faith, world events. We are here today with our good friend and a regular returning guest to the Mary Grace Show. We have Dr. Troy Spurrill. This is Ask the Doctor live Q&A. Before we get to questions, I wanted to give a shout out to my Rumble audience. You guys have been sitting over there putting questions in the chat for the last half an hour. Hold on, hold your horses. We will get to your questions, and if you would, please put a QQQ in front of your questions so that I can easily identify them as I go back through the chat. I'm monitoring chat on multiple platforms today, and so that would be helpful. But Dr. Troy, welcome to the show. This is very exciting. It's our first interview since the swearing in of our new commander in chief. How do you think it's going? How are you?
Fast. It's a speed at which we've never seen before. We are in very historic
Yeah.
biblical times, and it's quite apparent. And there's definitely a sense of buckle up, whether you are pro Trump or against Trump. Buckle up is a good way to say it for everyone.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to break down, a lot to get through, because from my perspective,
Mhm.
knowing politics is one thing. I'm in healthcare. I'm also a Christian, and so there's a spiritual component to all of this. There is a political component. There's a healthcare component.
Yeah.
There's just so much to unwrap. So yeah, I cannot wait to dive in. I've been waiting for this.
It's exciting, and the work that you're doing, I would say, uh, the worker is, worthy of his reward, and what you've been doing for years, um, I think is coming to fruition, and so that's very exciting, and I think a lot of us feel that way. You put in the time, you go through in some cases what is just sheer hell. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been through it the last several years, and even during the first, Donald Trump administration, it was hard,
Yeah.
because of the constant attacks and because of the impeachments and the rabid Trump derangement syndrome behavior. I feel like in some ways we got cheated out of a regular presidency. I actually want to reclaim my time. I mean, I would love it if he could have a whole nother term on top of this because really it was taken up with the lawfare that they pursued against him. And it was hard on all of us. I think everybody who is in the chat today or listening or on the replay can relate to the idea that uh, we kind of we felt like we were constantly under attack because we were, and it was very hard to voice your opinion about anything without being maligned and labeled and that kind of thing. And I imagine in the wellness space, it probably was much the same way, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so things are really changing. We're experiencing a sea change, and, it's exciting, very exciting. I wanted to ask you, what do you think, having watched the hearings this week, did you get a chance to listen, to any of the questions for Robert Kennedy Jr.?
Oh yeah.
And, what are your thoughts about him, about the Democrats, the Bernie Sanders, and, all the other detractors, Elizabeth Warren, some of those come to mind. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, we're seeing the hypocrisy that exists, as many of these people were close friends of his, and so we are seeing also the people.
Yeah,
This is the most people I've ever watched hearings like this, and they're seeing outright the games that these senators are playing, and it's true on both sides. Like, don't this is not just a Democrat thing. Actually, there was many times where I wanted to hear his answer, to hear what it was, and the senator interrupted them because it wasn't the answer they wanted to hear.
yeah,
And that's just game playing. and we need to get these people out. We need to hold these senators accountable because that's not okay. It's
Mhm.
about time we, the people, stand up and get the truth. And
Yeah.
these people that are supposedly representing us, they should be seeking the truth. It's very obvious they're not. They're
Yeah.
seeking the answers to their agenda, and that's a
Mhm.
different story. And RFK is
Mhm.
is pointing that out pretty darn clear when it comes to just the questions that were asked by a lot of the Democratic senators or the people that are against them. And it is
Yeah.
important for us to be able to disagree about things and be able to discuss it.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of emotion coming from some of the senators with RFK and trying to paint him into a corner of what they want the public to think
Mhm.
about him versus actually trying to get a sense of who he is and what he's about and what does he stand for.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that I see with the Democrats in particular, but also a lot of the rhinos, for example, Mitch McConnell has said that he's not going to vote for him, which is,
Yeah,
ever since the stolen election, he really has been openly against Trump. And I actually heard that he told Trump, that if he didn't drop the protests against the election, that he would vote against him in the second impeachment. And
yeah,
and you notice around that time that Trump, um, was no longer nice to Mitch. He was
yeah,
trying to be magnanimous and give him
yeah,
the benefit of the doubt, and things Trump flipped after that, which I would too. I mean, that was
yeah.
such a betrayal. But if you understand who owns these people and who runs them and who their handlers are, let's not forget that Mitch McConnell is married to a Chinese wife who is from a very high-ranking uh,
Yeah,
CCP family in
yeah,
China, and they're very they have a monopoly on shipping in China. So let and then she was the transportation secretary. So
yeah,
there was a lot of horse trading going on, and the background and uh, the backstory of a lot of these people is important to understand because, like you said, a lot of what they're saying is fake,
yeah.
and it's really just about building their brand. It doesn't have anything to do
Nope.
with doing the right thing. All of these people are looking to land a media spot, board positions,
Yep.
book deals, all of that. That's the end game here. It doesn't have anything to do with what the American people really need and furthering the well-being of our country. It's a
And that's
sad
true across the
reality.
board. Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
across the board. So that is
yeah,
also true for I saw Tucker Carlson speak to this where that was
yeah,
true for our military. No, sorry, it
yep,
was Matt Gaetz actually speaking on the Bill Maher show of all places.
okay. Yeah,
And Gates nailed it. And he said the problem is these generals are basically making choices for the contractors for their lucrative
yep,
retirement versus what the people need. Senator
yeah,
McConnell and a lot of
yep,
rhinos are doing the same thing, as are the Democrats, where they're making choices for favors for their personal profit. Scripture is very clear that the love of money is the root of all evil.
mhm,
And what Trump is doing right now is he's
yeah,
wiping out, draining the swamp as he said he would, providing a clean slate. But
mhm,
people need to step up. Christians need to step up
yeah,
into leadership roles and choose to lead in a different way. Choose to lead where they're
yes,
choosing people over profits. And even like Bernie Sanders saying that he's taking the most of his pharmaceutical money, which RFK brought out, which was brilliant. It's from the people. It's from the people. He kept trying to go back to that. It's not from these large lobbyists. Well, that's how a lot of them still work, and so it's still coming
mhm,
from a lot of those same people.
yeah,
And the reality is, term limits or whatever it's going to look like is going to be different. Where it should be a sacrificial position to go into leadership. You shouldn't come out of it profiting more, and you shouldn't be there for 20 years becoming like the number one investor in the world because you just are that good at predicting what the stock market's going to do. And so
right,
yeah,
right,
things are going to change. It's the same for our military. It's the
mhm,
same for our healthcare system. In the
yeah,
CDC, it's the same thing. these people in the CDC should not be moving into positions in pharmaceutical companies afterwards.
Yes, I agree, and I think that it's worth noting that Trump has already, moved to strip many of these high-ranking people of security clearances, and this was something that I didn't know until I got involved in doing the show and interacting more with people in Washington and in politics. I didn't realize that people have these security clearances well beyond
Yeah,
their job in government is over. And what it does for them is that it opens the door for them to go on these talk shows and to be regular guests. They can be the expert guest because they have access to insider knowledge on these topics because of their security clearances. And that is another way that they profit off of having worked in the government. And the end game, the ulterior motive is very clear for all to see when you understand that. Now, one thing that we need to keep an eye on when it comes to these clearances, General Flynn was explaining this, is that different clearances are issued through different agencies. And the fact that Trump is moving to strip the clearances is one thing, but we have to make sure that we hold them accountable and make sure that the follow through takes place. This is really important. And so um, if that's something, if you're a logistics kind of person, and you're keeping tabs, I would encourage somebody to make a spreadsheet of each of these people
yeah,
and, the agency that their, clearance was issued under, and then follow up and make sure that it actually gets removed. And what does this have to do with health? It has a lot to do with it because, a lot of these people have, they wield a lot of power.
yes,
And we saw this, for example, with conversations that came out with Mark Zuckerberg. We saw this with the Twitter files, that people in high positions of government were strong arming and threatening the heads of these media companies and social media companies to suppress the truth. In many cases, having to do with health. We saw that over and over during COVID. And in fact, it came out in a press briefing this week with Caroline Levitt. She excoriated the media
yeah,
for their role in lambasting and lampooning Trump when he said that it was a lab leak. Um, they, I mean, she said many of you in this room
yeah,
uh, pushed that lie, and that resulted in great harm to not only Americans but to people worldwide. And so this issue of security clearances is vital,
yeah.
and we do need to stay on top of it because of the outcomes and the potential for further harm from that type of censorship. That's how they get around the First Amendment, is by wielding that type of power. So yeah, it's very interesting. Did you hear Rand Paul? Did you hear his statement that he kind of used his time to go on a rant instead of questioning?
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
No, I didn't catch his.
Oh, okay. I might pull it up and play it because he was so eloquent and um he made the case for looking at information and applying reasoning to it
Yeah.
and not being so dogmatic about science, and instead he was advocating for everybody to allow RFK the benefit of the doubt, not to paint him as an anti this or an anti that, but to understand that he is dedicated to looking at the scientific process, which is that you follow the science where it leads. You
And
don't.
good science. There's a difference
Yes.
between good and bad
Y
science. One of
yeah,
one of the people that I
okay,
respect, he's a neurosurgeon, and he reads through this medical literature faster than anyone I know. So a lot of times when I'm
okay.
struggling myself, I'll send him a message
Yeah.
saying, "What do you take of this?" And sometimes within 5 minutes, he'll just send me a text message saying, "Bad study." I'm like, "There's no way you read that study. How do you know that's a bad study?" He said, and I learned this from him. He said,
Mhm.
"You go down to who funded it first, and then
Yeah.
you look at that part of it, and after a while, you start to see
Yeah.
consistently bad studies coming from the same funding source." And that early in my career, like that never came into my mind. I'd
Mhm.
look at it and try and figure out, does this make sense physiologically? Does it make sense
Yeah.
how God made us? And then that was kind of one of my filters. Now I
Okay.
start with that to see if it's a truly,
Mhm.
authentically non-biased study, and then kind of go from there. And
Yeah. Mhm.
I just want to speak to one thing you said, because Carolyn Levitt, she's so sharp, and I just want to give her, I just want to
27
lift
years
her up
old.
because she is doing such a good job. Not only her, but all of the people, the spokespeople for Trump, whether it
Yeah.
be the border czar or Miller or
Mhm.
whoever it is,
Mhm.
they are on point. I want people to hear this because a lot of people are a little upset still about 2020, but I want people to hear this part. I was speaking with one of another podcast and show that I do, and that person was interviewed on another show with someone who does a little bit
Mhm.
more political background, and they shared something.
Mhm.
They had been working for 4 years since 2020. Trump and his team, extended team, have been working
Yeah.
behind the scenes developing, and everything we're seeing now, the rapid fire, it's all because for the last 4 years they have been prepping under the guise that he's going to win, and this is how we're going to roll out. That's why he knows what to do so instantaneously, and he can do 200 executive orders, and he can fire. They've
Yep.
got the strategy and the plan already mapped out. They also know, for the most part, who's who in Washington D.C., who they can work with, who's on board, who's not. And so that is
Mhm.
all been in play. That's why these people are so on point. When you
Yep.
look, like, there's zero
Yep.
doubt coming out of their voice, and you look at it and say, man, that is just fire right there as far as
Yeah.
what they're speaking.
Yeah.
And it's so just enjoyable to see the
Mhm.
execution of a plan coming, like, just so rapid fire, and these people are
Yeah.
elite. Carolyn Levitt is elite at, what is she,
Yeah.
27?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And she just had a
Unbelievable.
baby. She had a
I
baby, like,
know.
a week before Trump got shot.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so she was his campaign spokesperson.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you say that. So I keep this on my desk. This is, says "Be ready." I don't know if it's backwards, but,
It is, but it's okay.
this is something that the Lord whispered to me several years ago. And it's right here. I see it all the time. And this is what I'm seeing taking place with this administration. They're so well prepared. And one good example of that is um Richard Grinnell. He's a
Yeah.
name that he's not a household name. He's not one of the big talkers. Some people may not know who he is. He was the ambassador to Germany, and he was also acting DNI at toward the end of Trump's term. And he's a statesman. He's a diplomat, and so Trump appointed him as an emissary, and it was one of those appointments that people sort of laughed off, right? Oh,
Yeah.
it's this is just a cushy job. Well, he went to Venezuela
Yeah.
yesterday and brought back our hostages.
Yeah.
And
Six,
one
six. Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah, and one thing that, people don't know unless you've been following Rick consistently is that he has been working, nonstop all these 4 years. He's been to, the Balkans a number of times. He has been essentially, doing diplomatic relations on behalf of the people, uh, at Trump's behest all of this time. And if you think about that, it ties into what you just said, which is that they never stopped working. And this is what I think it's important for people to understand. Uh, I was following Rick on his social media, and so I saw him, going on these trips. He went to Kosovo. He's been to a lot of strategic places, and having him as the ambassador to Germany was very strategic, and I wouldn't be surprised if, there's already deals in place with the Nord Stream pipeline because, as people know, President Trump warned that if Russia wasn't handled, if the Ukraine situation, wasn't dealt with, that there would be a monopoly on oil in Europe through the Nord Stream pipeline. And so that's a really critical piece of that we're gonna see come into play very soon. Um, I digress, but again, I think that it's important to see these concrete examples of how Trump and his team have continued working nonstop around the clock, to prepare for such a time as this.
Yeah.
And here we are, and it's very exciting. Have you seen the rapid response team that Trump has on
Yes.
X? All right,
Yeah.
everybody needs to know about this. This is it's called it's Rapid Response 47, and this is literally an anti-propaganda uh, account. And what it is that it has a silver badge, so that means it's an official government account. They do all day long is refute the lies of the legacy media. And literally, sometimes they will just flat out say, "You're lying. Stop lying."
Yeah.
And so, for example, with the spending cuts, one of the big narratives going around was that all of the individual programs, the food stamps, the Social Security, all of that was being cut, and the opposition was using it for fear mongering. And these guys are putting out, contradiction. They're putting out the truth, and they're just truth bombing, social media all day long, and that's really important. So I encourage everybody to go to that account and watch them and follow them because they are going to be countering these narratives, especially the panic, the fear mongering, and because you see a lot of people who are influenced by fear, who still have TDS, they're constantly coming at you, telling you things like, "Well, that's the end of WIC. Kids are gonna go hungry."
Yeah. Yeah.
All you have to do is go to Rapid Response and search their account, and it's likely that they've posted a rebuttal to that argument, and you can just copy and paste and go, "Nope, that's a lie."
Yeah.
So
So good.
it's gonna help you counter those narratives, especially as we go into the transition into a lot of changes at
Yeah.
HHS, right?
Yeah,
People are
I'm
gonna
gonna
need
say
to
it
know
this
that.
way because, Super Bowl's coming, so I'm gonna use a football analogy, so if you don't
Okay,
get
good.
football, just bear with me here, but Trump and his team are like a massive offensive line that are just pushing, everyone back, and all of the people in the backfield, the running backs and the receivers and everything that are back there behind this line, these are the people that God has equipped, number 1. So just like RFK, for the last 30 years, he has been
Yeah.
focused in this one area he's equipped. I've been doing functional medicine in my realm for 30 years, and I am ready to start working in a different way. That's true for many people. So God has equipped a lot of people for this time and
Mhm.
this season, and so they're going to be getting the ball and then stepping up and really following this open field that Trump's people are creating
Mhm.
for us.
Mhm.
And they're very organized. They're coached well. They're ready to actually push back, and we're
Yeah.
about to see change like we never have before. And so it's very important to for people to kind of see that there's been a plan. They're
Mhm.
executing it beautifully, just
Mhm.
like in football when they actually are able to push the defense back. And they're equipping, Trump's team are equipping us with all of the resources we need in the moment to counter a lot of the narratives because they know what's coming. They
Yep,
they
yep.
don't change the playbook ever.
Yes, yes, it's so true, and I will take your football analogy and I'll raise you one, because I have talked about this before. In Trump's first term, since then, you've seen, some of his detractors, people who supposed conservatives, Republicans,
Yeah.
anti-Trump, never Trumpers, they would use the argument that he didn't actually drain the swamp. Well,
right?
first of all, yes, he drained a lot. I mean, he first of all, he exposed it. And
Yeah,
so, you see all those swamp creatures rolling around in the mud. That's a big deal. But what I've been saying is that his if he were the quarterback, not only was his offensive line not doing what you just described,
yep,
some of them were actually tackling him.
yeah, right,
And they were
exactly.
working against him, or they were leaving holes open so that the defense could intentionally come at him
Yep,
and, sabotage. So, if you watch football, you know what a lousy offensive line looks like, and that's what was happening with Trump. And, imagine if your O-line was, paid off or emotionally unstable, and they were supposed to be protecting you, you're gonna get sacked a lot. Now, the
yep,
fact that Trump got sacked and still advanced the ball
yep,
is a miracle.
yep,
Um,
MVP.
yeah, I mean, it's like he got a lot of yardage, and so I think people need to remember that and keep it in perspective. He literally in many cases, was trying to run the ball down the field, with, like, both hands tied behind his back. So this is really important to understand.
I feel the
Um
full draining of the swamp is gonna happen within the next 2 years. So, when we get to those next level of elections, in Kim Clement's prophecy, he said, during, that Trump would be elected twice, which he got that part right, and he
Yeah,
also said, "During the fall, they will fall. Many embarrassing moments for Democrats, but especially Republicans." I believe, though, that's coming up yet, and I
yeah,
believe and then he says, "During the Christmas season, the truth will finally come out, and it'll be so obvious even the young people will see it." I believe we have not had that come to fruition yet, and I think we're going to see a slow release of information, starting with JFK and RFK's assassinations and Martin Luther King's, then the Epstein files, and
yeah,
all this slow drip of information is going to come out, so that people will realize who really has been behind everything. Then, when the people are ready, Trump's going to release the actual data because they have it. They have the data from
mhm,
2020. What did Trump say?
yeah,
January 6th, he said, "We caught him. We caught them all."
yep,
There's a reason
yep,
why he said that. And that
yeah,
will come out when more
yeah,
people have been now privy
mhm,
to the fact that all of our own government, all of these the deep state swamp stuff, it's Republicans and Democrats. And Kim Clement's prophecy said many embarrassing moments for Democrats, but especially Republicans. That's when we see the full draining of the swamp. That
yeah.
is to come. We're not there yet.
I agree, and, I do believe that we are coming into the golden age of America, and I'm one of those people that in the last 4 years, especially in the last 6 to 8 months, I've heard a lot of people say, we're in the end of the end times, that, things are going downhill, even people saying that this is God's judgment on America. And I don't know where that's coming from, because we're in the kingdom age, and God is not destroying America. I
Well, I have
don't
some
believe that.
insight into that because the scripture
Yeah.
also says to pay attention to our prophets, but to be guarded against false prophets. So,
Yes, yes.
um, Kim Clement, again, I believe, is a true prophet of God. And he
Mhm.
said, "This is not a time of judgment, this is a correction."
Yes.
So, those were his words, number one.
Yes.
However, I believe we're being given grace. And
Mhm.
this is still the spirit of the end times because things don't change.
Mhm.
Let me play it out a little differently.
Sure.
If Trump did not be obedient with what he was called to do, and or we as Christians or people don't rise up and do what we're supposed to do, then the exact same thing that we are just getting through is going to happen again, this time with the Antichrist involved, the true Antichrist. And then we'll see the end times play out. But a lot of what we're going through looks like end time revelation because
Mm.
it's the spirit of it. So it's the same thing, but this is a course correction versus the judgment
Mhm.
part of it. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
what we're living through is an example of what it will potentially look like. But instead of us having this nice little correction that we're on right now, it will continue to go the other direction. And
Mhm.
we're just so blessed to be living in the time we are right now because
Yeah.
we are about to enter a kingdom age, and
Mhm.
that's that's just, I mean, mind-boggling when you think about it.
Yeah, and I think that I do believe that first of all, I think that there are some people who have missed their chance, and what do I mean by that? Some of the swamp creatures,
Yeah,
it doesn't I'm not talking about any denomination or any
yeah,
specific, political affiliation, but there are people the Bible talks about the reprobate mind,
yeah,
and a couple of years ago, God said to me, there are some people who have been given their last chance. And it's very sobering because, any one of us could be in that place. And
oh, yeah,
it is possible to turn your back completely on God.
yeah,
He is a God of grace. He is a God of mercy. His loving kindness, the chesed of God has been pursuing mankind from even before the dawn of creation. And, we shouldn't forget that, but we never want to take it for granted. And I do believe that the example of uh, that Jesus used when you send the demons out um, of the house. When you sweep the house, you must fill the house
yeah,
again with the things of God, with the Spirit of God, so that they don't come back and inhabit, because
yeah,
it will be 7 times what it was.
yeah,
And this is where we are, I think, as a nation. We are being given grace to eradicate the wickedness. For example, the transgender policy.
yeah,
This is just wickedness, and you know, are we there yet? No. Things have to happen at the state level. Different states are trying to codify abortion uh, as an inalienable human right in their constitutions. Colorado has already done it. So we cannot take the eye off the ball. But in terms of what is the potential for this nation, this is God's nation, and
yeah.
I don't see our nation coming to an end. I don't see civilization coming to an end as we know it. But we do have to steward what we've been given. The technology, um, for example, AI. It's
Mhm.
it's it's here, everybody. AI
Yep.
is here.
It's not
We're
going
not
away.
we're not going to get rid of it, and so we have the responsibility, just like with the telephone, the television. Uh, I think we missed the boat on a lot of that, especially with television. We did allow the propaganda to take hold, and how can we how can we reverse that, that trend? How can we take a different tactic with the technology that we have emerging now? I think that's a valid question.
And I agree. It's the question. So many are called, few are chosen. So why is that? It's
Mhm,
because the ones that are called, it's important for all of us to repent as a nation and
mhm.
repent individually, turn
Yeah,
back to God, but you need to know who God is. So
yeah,
how do you, if you can't hear God speak to you, then there's going to be a problem or trouble with being obedient, right? So, how do you know God's voice? Well, number one, the Bible. Read
mhm,
the Bible. That's God's word.
yeah,
That's one way God speaks to you. And so when you really, really know God and have an idea of what God's voice sounds like, what God would do, it'll help you through these difficult seasons and transitions when it comes to AI, when it comes to a lot of other challenges that are going to come our way. So you must have a personal relationship with Jesus, with God and the Holy Spirit, and
yeah,
discern, and
yeah.
stay with it. So fill that house with glory, His glory. Fill that house with His word. Fill
Yes.
that house and your body, your house, with the voice of God, with the what He has given us, and then watch how God speaks to you. And He'll speak through your scripture. He'll speak through your circumstances. He'll use other people, and He will talk to you up here. But you've got to get rid of all the other voices in the head. And how do you know if what you're hearing up here is of God? By knowing the word and then bring it back. Does this align with the word?
Mhm,
And then
mhm.
move forward. If we have everybody who are in a role of authority, making decisions that align with God's word, we're living in a different world. And that's what we're
Yeah.
looking for right now. That's the opportunity we've been given.
Yes, and I wanna make one clarification because my friend Scott is saying, "I don't think God has a nation, he has a people." But here's what I wanna say about that. America is a nation that was founded on the principles, that God set forth, and it is a nation that has been given a mandate to bring the gospel into the world. So when I say that America is God's nation, that's what I mean. It doesn't mean that Americans are the only people of God. I wanna make
Oh,
that
no.
distinction. God's people are all over the planet for sure, 100%. Um, on that note, I wanna take a quick break, and I want to, hear a word from a couple of our sponsors, including our friends at Synapse Center for Health and Healing. And, I want to remind everybody that we have a special going with our freeze-dried American grass-fed beef. This is an amazing product, and our friends at Grid Down Chowdown are sponsoring us right now. They are giving a special. They have a subscription, 24 serving subscription. If you sign up for that, that's a subscribe and save type of model. And if you do that, if you get the subscription, here I'm going to just take you off camera for just a second, Troy. Don't go away. So if you get the subscription, it's 24 servings. You can do it monthly, bi-monthly, and you're going to get you're going to get 4 servings for free when you go to griddownchowdown.com and use the promo code Mary Grace. This is what it looks like. This is a bag of freeze-dried beef. It's not jerky. This is ground beef that reconstitutes with water, and it is just like when you get raw ground beef. This is grass-fed, grass-finished, American grown. When you buy it, you are supporting and helping to protect American farms and ranches. We're going to hear from these guys. We're also going to hear from some of our other sponsors. And I want to remind everybody that if you are trying to find my sponsors, you can always go to marygracemedia.com. We have a number of companies that we partner with. We feature certain ones here on the show, but you can always go to the website, marygracemedia.com, and you can scroll through that and see any company that you want to buy from. It directly benefits us here at the show. So we're going to take a few minutes to hear from some of these sponsors, and we'll be right back. Don't go away. Keep your volume up if you need to step away from the computer. We don't want you to miss this. We have some great deals. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Jordan, and this is my brother. And I'm Nace, and we're at the Grid Down Chowdown, and this is Larry, who is a local rancher that we've partnered with. Now, Larry, you've been ranching for over 4 generations, is that correct?
That's correct. I'm 3rd generation, my son's 4th generation, and I've got some grandkids that are 5th generation.
Man, that's
We've
awesome.
been here for quite a while, yeah.
All right, now, Larry, your cattle is grass-fed, grass-finished, and pasture-raised, just like God intended them to be.
Yes, because I want to know what's in that animal,
Right.
what it's been fed, and so the only way to do that is for us to keep it all natural, just like God has done it for years and years and years, thousands of years.
How has partnering up with us helped you and your ranch?
Well, it's allowed us to develop a market that we didn't have before, one that can get directly to the consumer, and that's great.
And just remember, more importantly, with every package that you buy, we put a salvation track in there. So from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for allowing us to do what we believe that God has us here to do. And just remember, God loves you. He really does.
Amen.
Go to griddownchowdown.com. Americans spend more now than ever on healthcare, and we're sicker than almost anybody in the world. We've put our trust in a system that's completely let us down. Dr. Troy Spurrill and the team at Synapse Center for Health and Healing have changed all that. They are a functional medicine clinic, and they get to the root cause of what's made you sick in the first place. Once they do that, they give you solutions to help you get out of that. This is the way that medicine was meant to be practiced, and this is what they're doing. They're changing the entire system from the inside out, one person at a time, and you could be one of those people. And so when you're working with the team at Synapse, they're giving you solutions and not just prescriptions. That's a game changer for me. When you set up a free discovery call with Synapse, you're starting on a journey of healing. You're starting on a journey of getting answers. And that's why I've partnered with them, because I want you to be healthy. I want your family to be healthy. I want you to have all of the resources that you need to steward the body and the health that God's given you. Go to officialsynapse.com and tell them Mary Grace sent you. That's Official Synapse, SYNAPSE.
This past year has been one of the hardest in MyPillow's history. It's because of you that we're making it through. My employees and I want to thank you for your continued support by extending our wholesale prices on classic MyPillows. Get standard classic MyPillows only $14.98. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.98. But it gets even better. Upgrade to a queen size MyPillow for just $18.98. King size only $1 more. Get my body pillows $29.98 and multi-use MyPillows for only $9.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of these wholesale prices, including my standard size MyPillow, originally $49.98, now only $14.98. Queens $18.98, Kings only $1 more. Not only that, order $75 or more, ship absolutely free. From all of us here at MyPillow.
Excellent. I love Mike Lindell. Remember, you can go to marygracemedia.com. If you forget any of those links or promo codes or anything, go to my website, go to the shopping tab. It's very easy to find it. I want to remind everybody, it's before you know it, we're going to be in graduation and wedding season. And this is the perfect time to shop at My Pillow, because all of the things that people are going to need can be found there: pillows, towels, sheets, clothing, slippers, pet beds, all of that. It's all right there. So you don't need to go anywhere else. Go to mypillow.com and use promo code Mary Grace. Now we're back at the show. We're back on the show with our friend Dr. Troy Spurrill. I'm going to put your link up here for just a second. So Dr. Troy runs the Synapse Center for Health and Healing, and that is officialsynapse.com. You saw it in the commercial. It's SYNAPSE. Tell everybody quickly where you practice, where you're based, and then who you can treat, and just the basics of what you do.
Yeah, so we are primarily a functional medicine. So, generally speaking, how God created us, we endorse the mental, chemical, physical, and spiritual components of proper communication. We look for anything that's breaking down proper communication, because that's what leads to dysfunction or symptoms, and then eventually will lead to a disease. So, just like any relationship we have, whether it be you and God, you and a spouse,
Mhm.
there's a breakdown in communication that leads to dysfunction and then disease. So, we look at the physical, checking multiple different things chemically,
Mhm.
the lab
Yeah.
work, looking for the patterns and all that. So it's more of a complete process, and things are changing. We've also, given the times we're in, we treat currently patients from 50 states and 12 countries. But God has put on my heart years ago. I had written this up, and it's actually coming to fruition, but we are looking for affiliates in all 50 states. We're looking to teach our processes and create kingdom business models in healthcare, so that we can start to implement a lot of what we do. In fact, I'm going to share a quick story of recently I've been asked to walk alongside a surgeon and his team at one of our trauma hospitals here. This is the traditional medical system. And as we're going through the patients, they're asking me, what would you do in functional medicine for this case, in this case? And it was fascinating, the amount of application that was still there, even in the trauma setting. And there was a very, very cool moment where there was a gentleman there who had been shot and had some issues with some nerves that were paralytic.
Mm.
And the surgeon, also a Christian, was just pouring into this young boy
Mhm.
and really just lifting him up, showing him how he could even change his environment, which is part of the hood.
Wow.
As we were leaving, I explained all the neurologic stuff and how to get the function of the feet back, and he was very encouraged. And then the surgeon did something I wasn't expecting. He asked this 21-year-old, "Is it okay if Dr. Spurrill prays for you?" And
Mm.
so I did, and this big crocodile tear comes out of this kid's eye. And as we're walking out of the room, the surgeon says, now 2 men of God have prayed over that boy. And I just thought, this is healthcare. This is
Yeah.
what it should be like. It was a completely different experience. Not only did he change in how he started operating, but the team changed in how they were treating this boy, because they were seeing him as being like pushing back, and he really wasn't. And so it was
Mhm.
a completely different dynamic when it came to the healing process.
Yeah.
And I'm just so optimistic
Mhm.
that we're going to be seeing that change. So for your listeners, if you are a functional medicine practitioner, if you're just starting out, or a traditional doctor looking to start out, and you're wanting a kingdom
Mhm.
business model that encompasses functional medicine, go to our website. There's a page there specifically for that. We are going to pour into you and teach you everything we've done over the last 30 years to generate the success that we've had in helping people from a biblical principled platform at the same time. And so I really feel like it's our calling. It's what I have been called here to do, and one of the reasons why I've tried to stay hidden for years, and
Mhm.
definitely not working out too well right now.
Not
So
happening, yeah.
yeah,
I think, this is exciting because people always ask, can we get somebody like him in our state or in our city? And so if you know somebody that leans in that direction, if you have a provider that you feel would be a good fit, please refer them. Also, if you are wanting to get a consultation, if you think that your situation warrants it, or if you're not sure, go to the website or call them. You can make sure that you tell them that Mary Grace referred you. Their number is 651-209-9906, 651-209-9906. And it's a free consultation. And then you can decide if you want to go from there. It's fantastic. I've been working with Dr. Troy and his team, and we're making headway. We had I've had some bumps in the road here. And speaking of health, I actually went on the Sean Baker podcast. A lot of you guys know him. He's known as the Carnivore Doctor. You can go check that out on his YouTube, Sean Baker, SHAWN. That was posted a couple of days ago. And I actually had a listener here who is on X who saw me on the podcast, Nathan. Nathan, I can't respond to your comment in the chat here. My software doesn't let me, but I do see your comment and I 100% concur. Maybe we'll talk about this in a second. He's talking about the food culture in the
yeah,
church. It's abysmal.
it's not good at all.
It's very, very unhealthy. But Dr. Troy, I don't want to forget, you mentioned before we went live, there was something that you were wanting to talk about, some encouraging things that you were hearing behind the scenes, and we didn't want to we don't want to drop the ball on that. I want to make sure we get that in our
Well,
conversation.
I'm just going to say it this way. So, especially for all of my people that are not necessarily in the United States, so Canada in particular, Mexico, I want you just to hang in there with us. Scotland, Ireland, Europe, hang in there with us. There is going to be a bit of a rough ride here for a little bit. It's going to be a little bumpy. It's kind of like going back to the gym, and we're about to get our muscles big
Mhm.
and strong, but you got to go through the process of tearing them down first and restructure. So a lot of the restructuring that's happening in the United States is going to have an effect worldwide. And so it's important to start equipping yourself. It doesn't matter what country you're in, whether it be Canada, Scotland, Ireland, Mexico, or
Mhm.
elsewhere. Be ready. So pour into what God has equipped
Mm.
you with, because some of you are going to be needed to step into leadership roles in different areas. So just be ready. Number one, because that is how the stuff that I'm working on is not for right now. There's some stuff like that for sure. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes I feel
Mhm.
like I'm building the airplane as I'm flying it, but a lot of it is really for 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, for a
Mhm.
completely different system. Trump is working 5 years, 6 years, and 10 years
Yeah.
down the road with a lot of
Yeah.
his stuff. It's going to be a little rough for some other countries. And so there's going to be a
Mhm.
lot of ammo for people coming back at Trump from other countries who support him, especially Canada. and they're just hang in there. And I am just claiming that Canada is going to come back to Christ, that Canada is going to come back to God in this process. And a lot of people are going to be just impacted and changed. And so there's a lot of good things going to be happening, but it's going to be a little more challenging than ripping a Band-Aid off for a lot of other countries. So bumpy,
Right.
bumpy,
And
bumpy.
and just remember, I wanna make a comment about Trump and about his manner and the way that he does things, especially if you are in a country that's known for politeness.
Yeah,
Don't mistake his strength for meanness.
yeah,
Trump is fighting. And sometimes it looks meaner or uglier than you're used to. That doesn't mean that he's mad at you.
no,
He's mad at evil. He
yeah,
he has a righteous anger right now. And so please remember that. And also please remember when he posts things, especially when he's in all caps mode, that he is in some cases speaking to one or two people. Not every message is for you.
no,
And this is where it's really important to put your feelings aside and remember that as a Christian, especially, you gave up your right to be offended. That's nailed to the cross. Jesus took all offense for you, and this is I can't stress this enough because if you're looking for a way to be offended, especially by Trump, you will be offended.
oh yeah,
And this is critical to understand. Protect your mind, um, and guard your emotions. So this is really critical that you understand this. When he talks about things like Greenland or Mexico or Canada, he's very strategic, and he's
yeah,
also a generational thinker.
yeah,
And I could talk a lot about President Trump, but some people say, don't mistake kindness for weakness. I'm going to reverse that, and I'm going to say, don't mistake strength for meanness. There's a difference, and President Trump is the embodiment of that difference. He is very strong. He is God's man for the job and for the
yeah,
time, and he's not going to back down. He has taken a bullet for you, even if you're in another country. He wants
he
other
does.
countries to prosper, and he has said that. And
Yeah,
he has said peace is the prize. He doesn't want your nation to be pulled into foreign wars. He doesn't want your nation to be overrun by invaders from other countries who are brought in to degrade your society and your culture. He wants nations and cultures to thrive in the way and the location that God meant them to be. That means all of the countries that are sometimes referred to as third world. They have actually been given the short end of the stick because
yeah,
the leadership in those countries has been so corrupted
yeah,
that even though we've poured billions and billions of dollars, trillions into those countries, they never get better. That's not America's fault. And we shouldn't be taking all of those people on our doorstep. That's not going to fix the problem. That's just importing the problem. The problem is systemic at the leadership level of those countries. That has to be exposed. That has to be fixed. Poor government and fiscal mismanagement should not become the problem of the United States of America. I think that's
he
a mic
actually wants
drop.
to empower the other countries, and he is, because you saw the past president of Kenya
Yeah,
stand up there and declare that we don't need to be reliant on the United States. We have
yeah,
set this up with our own corruption, and so
yeah,
it's happening. And so he does want to empower these other
yeah,
countries. And we were in a war with all this. And again, to go back to the football analogy, we
yeah,
don't want that offensive line who are pushing back against all of this, everything that's coming at us. It's not their job to be polite. May I please block you, sir, is not going to fly when it comes to actually what he needs to do and push you back. If it's a war and you've got a
yeah,
soldier battling another soldier, we don't want politeness, actually. We want
yeah,
protection. We
yeah,
want guards. We want actual guards. But to actually be doing that in a way of still being a general at the same time, and where you're thinking of 10 years down the road, when you're
yeah.
thinking generationally, it's absolutely epic what's happening right now.
Right, and this is important too. I think that let's not forget that being forceful and being a strong person can that you can accomplish that while following the law.
Yeah.
And that's what Trump wants to do. So don't let anybody tell you that he is weaponizing the Justice Department, or that's all what they did. He has been very, very clear that he wants to do everything by the book, enforce the laws that we have, and follow the laws, follow the rule of law. And in some cases, the laws do need to be changed and reformed. And that is something we're looking at too. The executive orders that he has right now, he knows, he's aware that this is a stopgap, that these things need to be brought forth as legislation so that they can be codified. He had to stop the bleeding, though. And that's
Yep.
what this is about. Even when it comes to spending, some people are worried, oh my goodness, the Park Service, these things. When you are in the hole financially, anybody that's done budgeting knows, like, you got to go into an austerity mode for a while.
Yep.
It's not forever, but you've got to close the checkbook and stop writing checks for money you don't have. And it's painful, and it's not forever. So please keep that in mind, and give him the grace to do what he needs to do. And don't major on the minors, because if you follow every little rabbit trail of panic, oh my gosh, she's cutting this program. Oh my gosh, she's doing this is, and for goodness sake, turn off NPR. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, and one thing I want to say too about what Trump is doing is that, he does think generationally. And,
Mhm.
and I know that for people who have been through many, many years and many generations, you may not see the full outcome of this in your lifetime. But what I encourage you to do is pray for him, and pray from a perspective of somebody who knows what good times look like and what the prosperity of America looks like. We once had a country where you had the ability for, one spouse to work and the other spouse to stay home, and to have a house and a car, and to have your kids go to safe schools, and to have, a nice meal on the table at the end of every day, to live off of one income, and to buy a home and pay for a home off of one income. And that is not a far-fetched idea. And so for those of you who remember that, think about it. Nobody used credit cards. We didn't have the debt that we have. We weren't printing money hand over fist. That has happened in the last 50 years. And so there's a lot to do and a lot to change,
Yep.
but it can happen. But we have to, like I said, close the checkbook and get some things in order and stop the bleeding, close the border, get our food cleaned up. I mean, there's a lot of areas that we have to deal with. So please pray for him, and please give him grace, and bring him to the throne of God in your prayers, and his team. They are still facing 24/7 resistance. Don't think that's gone away. The people that are against him would do anything to see him fail. Now, let's switch to questions, because I think
Yep.
we could talk
I
forever.
know.
But this is great. It's so exciting to be in this time. I've got a couple of questions on Rumble, and if you're on Facebook, I did want to say, hey, Facebook, listen, you guys have gotten my page up to 95,000 followers. It's amazing. It's grown exponentially. So welcome to all of the new followers. I'm so happy. One thing I wanted to say about all of my platforms is that President Trump and his team are relying on independent media like the Mary Grace Show to get messaging, to get the truth out, to get the messages out. The way that that happens is if you hit the little share button. And if you're on Rumble, you copy the link and you share it on your social media, you send it to people in a message. You send it in an email, do whatever it takes to send the message out so that more people can find the Mary Grace Show. We will continue to bring you this kind of content. We need to get it in front of as many eyeballs as possible. And that's where you come in. That's why it's called social media. I can share as many times as I want, but it takes, if 90,000 of you, 95,000 share this, then it grows exponentially, because, then all of those people share it again, and it literally is exponential. That's how things go viral. That's what we want, and I do appreciate it. I appreciate all of you, and I wanted to explain to you how that works. So keep doing it. Okay, let's jump to a couple of questions. I want to get to, there was a question that was in the live chat early on, and it
I've got
seemed
that one. Is it functional medicine textbooks?
I'm not sure because I lost the question.
I
You're
have it
on
here. I can answer it. So it's I am a nurse. Do you have any recommendations for functional medicine textbooks? So the
Oh,
answer is
okay.
yes. So there's generally three good ones to start with. There's a textbook. It's literally called The Textbook of Functional Medicine.
Okay.
And that's a good one. There's another one that's called Laboratory Evaluations for Integrative and Functional Medicine.
Okay.
And then there's one called Integrative and Functional Medical Nutrition Therapy Principles and Practices. So those are the three. They have different volumes and they're updating them. There's also a whole bunch of there's the Functional Medicine University and Functional Medicine Institute that give classes as well. So I do encourage a lot of medical professionals to look at that, be certified in it. A lot of the people we're going to be looking at onboarding already have certifications, but not everyone. But we would want them to start learning the principles of integrative and functional medical therapies, and so those are three good textbooks to start with.
Excellent. Okay, so let's go to the next question, and I'm answering a couple questions here online as well. So, on Rumble, let's get Rowdy's question. My BP runs on average 150/70. I've heard that the diastolic number is the one to be most concerned about. I'm 70, work full time, 13,000 steps a day, drink at minimum 80 ounces of water a day, and drink beetroot. I'm not sure what the question is, but, maybe Dr.
I can
Troy could
comment on that. Yeah.
comment on that? Yeah, that's a lot of steps. Good job.
Yep. And it and he or she, I can't remember if this is he said she or not, but
I don't
that's
know if
right.
it's Rowdy.
Yeah. So basically, 150/70. So what she's saying is the bottom number is the most important. That is true. And so what we see though is with blood pressure, there's two things that can contribute to blood pressure. Either the brain, which is the nerve sending a signal to the arteries, is causing it to constrict, and stress can do that, and blood pressure goes up. Or hardening of the arteries is another one. So when we see 150/70, there's some concern that the blood pressure gets a little bit too high, but it actually can soften enough. So we look at stress as a potential for that. We look at a sleep disorder, can set that off. Generally speaking, though, that tells us that your omega-3 fatty acid or the softness of the blood vessels is doing okay. So there's not a huge concern with that by itself as an individual marker, but it does tell us there's a little imbalance in there. And I would look at whether or not there's a stress component. Sleep disorder accounts for that, or something called nitric oxide. So if nitric oxide is starting to get out of balance, supporting nitric oxide, which taking the beats, stuff like that, does support that. But arginine and other things can be onboarded to support nitric oxide to bring that blood pressure down. But just know that sneaky little sleep disorders can actually trigger that because
Mhm.
there's an adrenal component. Now, one of the other things that can trigger that is a blood sugar mismanagement scenario in the beginning, because that can also affect the
Mhm.
adrenal support, which adrenals are our stress glands. So it's really what we call the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary
Okay.
adrenal axis. So yes, I'd look at stress and nitric oxide as the two big components there, just to tweak it
Um,
and clean it up a little bit.
Awesome. And we actually in my wellness store, we have a product called Cardio Miracle, and that is that supports nitric oxide as well. It's a powder. It's a
Yep.
drink. So it's really good. And I'm going to put the link in here for you, Rowdy, if you want to check that out. I think you get a discount if you use just go to my wellness store. I think we have it on like a first order gets a discount. Um, so check that out. Mary Grace Wellness dot gethealthy.store. So great question. Let me see if anybody popped in with a question on the Facebook. Uh, okay. Somebody. Oh my goodness. So we got some bots here. We've got, okay. Interesting. So recently, just over the weekend, we've had like a crop of bots on Facebook. So uh, always something. And on Rumble is saying tinnitus. Mine started after the emergency broadcasting test. I was in a school and everything blasted. Is there
Mm.
any help for tinnitus? Very interesting.
Yeah. So the first thing we look at, there are some. So the emergency broadcast is just a high pitch, and so basically the hair cells that are in the inner ear, they're the receptors. So that means the receptor received that signal, and then didn't stop sending it. So that generally means there's a problem with that receptor. So that can be inflammation on the inner ear. So you want to make sure that there isn't any inflammatory stuff going on the outside or inside there. If there's sinus problems, that can contribute to it as well. Any tension in and around the head and the muscles can also do that. From a chemical perspective, we see this with CoQ10 deficiency. So it's important to you can get 200 milligrams of CoQ10, and that can help start to help improve that process. Sometimes, if you have been told to take an aspirin a day, aspirin, crazy enough, can actually trigger that whole tinnitus scenario as well. So the triggering mechanism is not really the problem. It was primed for that. So figuring out if there's a structural inflammatory thing, the CoQ10. Occasionally, if you produce a lot of wax in there as well, it can also be a omega-3 deficiency. So that's where we start, the CoQ10, omega-3 deficiency, and just some of the structural stuff.
Interesting. And,
Yeah.
I think tinnitus is the number one complaint of veterans. That's the
Yeah.
number one VA disability claim.
We're also
Interesting.
seeing a lot since COVID, actually. And so the inflammation that comes from COVID affects the lining of our sinuses. Whether you had COVID or were vaccinated, it doesn't actually matter. The spike protein creates an inflammatory reaction, and the ear
Interesting.
ringing, which is what the tinnitus is a byproduct of that. So reducing that inflammation. Not that I'm a huge fan of over the counter, but sometimes if you take an over the counter decongestant,
Mhm.
and it takes away your ear ringing, that'll tell you that it's a
Okay.
problem here with the sinuses. So use that as a diagnostic tool. Does that make
What
sense?
about white willow bark? Is that something that if you have inflammation, can that help?
Well, potentially, yeah. So there's a lot
Okay.
of different anti-inflammatories. White willow bark is one. Turmeric is
Okay.
another one. Ace mannin from aloe is another one.
Okay.
Fish oil is another one. So everyone responds to slightly different things, and that's one of the challenges with just going by what Dr. Google says. There's 100 different potentials that are there. You got to find the one that's right for you.
Right, right. That makes sense. Okay, we have Allison on Facebook. My 22-year-old daughter is suffering with hair loss. She stopped taking birth control pills 1 year ago.
Yeah, so hair loss, first thing we think of is thyroid dysfunction. Birth control does, if the estrogen that's part of that does actually interfere with thyroid potentially. And so getting the full thyroid assessment is what's done. So you can't just go into the doctor and order their general panel. So a general panel will have TSH and then like a T3 and a free T3, or a T4 and a free T4. You actually have to get all 8 markers: the TSH, the total T3, the total T4, the free T3, the free T4, reverse T3 is actually very important, and then the thyroid antibodies. And this is what they miss. thyroid antibodies, there's TPO and TGA, and those are the two thyroid antibodies. Birth control and other estrogen-like materials can trigger an autoimmune against your thyroid, and the labs can look normal, but if you have antibodies going after your thyroid, it'll actually stop the metabolism, and your hair, which is actually the fastest growing, is reduced. If it's not that, if it's not the thyroid, then the second most common thing is digestive malabsorption in the small intestine. We see this after antibiotic use, and they have what's called SIBO or SIFO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or small intestinal
Mhm.
fungal overgrowth, and we don't absorb minerals like we're supposed to. So those are the two most common. If she has digestive issues as well, it might be the SIBO and SIFO. And otherwise, thyroid is by far number one cause of that, especially at 22. Stress. This is why we get a reverse T3. If she's in college or she's stressed out, a reverse T3 will go up and block your thyroid from working. So all your other thyroid is working fine, but reverse T3, like if you're in a traumatic car accident, it'll block your thyroid from working so that your immune system can work on the trauma. Well, if our stress becomes too high for too long and you make reverse T3, it's doing the same thing. And so we'll start to see the thyroid functionally not be there. And even if the numbers look okay, if reverse T3 is too high, it's blocking your thyroid. Hair loss from stress, that's how it happens, is through a thyroid mechanism.
Okay. And Allison, I put the link for Dr. Troy for Synapse in the reply to you because it sounds like it would be worth it for you to give them a call. Um, I've been working with him with my thyroid, and what the good thing about Synapse is you can get the right blood panel and you can get it in your town. So they'll send you everything you need to know, and they'll send you the prescription, and then you can just set up the appointment online with your local lab. And the pricing is a lot better than if you just walked in and paid out of pocket. And he can order exactly the right labs that your daughter would need. And then they'll go over them. It's a very extensive report. They explain to you. It's not like when you go to the doctor and they just call you and they say, "Your labs look good, everything's fine." It's not like that at all. You
No.
actually get an in-depth explanation of what's going on, and it's very empowering. And so that's one of the big differences when you work with the team here at Synapse. It's a big, big difference. I mean, how many times have you gotten blood work and then you get the thing in the mail and they have maybe a check mark or they have a highlight on something that's wrong, and then you don't. I'm like, okay,
What do you
so
do?
what is, yeah, my
Yeah,
antibodies are high. Okay.
yeah,
What am I going to, how did that happen? What am I going to do? This is why we're using Synapse. This is why we're talking to Dr. Troy so that you can drill down and understand what actually started all this and how
yeah.
to alleviate this and get to the root cause. All right. Now, next question we have My Lady BJ. Do you work with patients diagnosed with CMT, Charcot-Marie-Tooth syndrome? How do you work with them, et cetera, treatment prognosis? Okay.
Yeah, we do, and it's kind of similar. There are limitations. There's certain things that we can't do. When there's permanent damage, we can't undo that damage, but we still look at everyone mentally, chemically, and physically. So, for example, we want to reduce the overall body burden of inflammation. So we look at the labs to see what is causing inflammation. Then we look at what in your diet and lifestyle might be contributing to that. For example, some people with CMT might actually have mold sensitivities as well, and that causes an inflammatory or immune dysregulation that makes a lot of their condition worse. So we still look at that. There are also physical things that are more common, sleep disorders that once addressed, you can start to manage. So we restore the God-given components of how we like when we get a good sleep at nighttime, a good deep restorative sleep, it resets a lot of things internally, regardless of our age. So we do look at a lot of the body's how the body is supposed to work to see what we can do. Now, with certain conditions, we can't undo damage. That's not what our job is. We're getting closer to that possibility in healthcare, but in functional medicine, we're going to look at what we can actually do to offset the inflammatory stuff, make sure the sleep is restored, make sure that there's good communication between the brain and the body and the nerves that aren't communicating. We will give exercises for those, or stimulatory properties. So a lot that we can generally do to help improve the overall environment, if that makes sense.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. We're going to go to Hedgehog 16, and then we're going to go to uh, Spencer, S. Spencer. So if you're still there, don't leave. We're going to get your questions. Hedgehog, what do you know and say about Pectisol, modified citrus pectin? I understand it would help with joints, but mine have felt worse since I started using it. Can I weigh in here?
Yep.
Um,
We get this
Carnivore
a lot.
diet. Carnivore. Just stop eating all that. Um, Carnivore diet, a lot of people with joint pain find that within a few weeks it just disappears. Even if you do it as a reset, even if it's not permanent, give it like 30, 60, 90 days where you cut out a lot of the vegetables and fruits because they have components that can uh, can contribute to those types of flare-ups. And I'll let Dr. Troy explain why. It's like I said, some people do it. It's like an elimination diet is what you're doing, and then people find that the joint pain is like gone. And then they decide, well, I'm not going to go back because I feel so good. Anyway, that's my take on it.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that's one method where you can go in and do that. And a lot of times, like the Pixel is going to be used as a binder. So, um, there's a reason for that. So I want to talk about the number one reason why people tend to go that way. And carnivore is one thing you can do to help offset that. But people who react to it, generally, you shouldn't actually have increased joint pain from taking it. So if you do, some people have an issue with citric acid as well. Almost all, about 90% of these people have an underlying fungal infection that's not being addressed. And so fungus, when they feed on sugar, will release acid. And then a lot of binders are used to help it in that scenario, which is good, except if you actually address the underlying fungal component, then you don't need the binders eventually. And so to your point, the carnivore diet does take care of it because there's no sugar for them to feed off of.
Mhm.
And but you also can do different things where you have like an anti-candida, antifungal diet, which is no sugar and a lot of the sugars that feed the fungal infection, with something like berberine, which helps to kill off the fungal infection. So my guess, because we don't have a lot of other information, but when I see someone react to the Pexol, it's because of an underlying infection, usually in the digestive system, that is fed by sugars, even some fruit sugars and some of the problems. So that's usually the scenario that we see. So I would look at that and address that part of it first.
Okay. Now, this is a question from S. Spencer. Before we take this question, I want to emphasize that uh, this show is for information and education purposes only. I'm not a doctor. Troy is a doctor, but he's probably not your doctor, and he's not diagnosing or treating in this episode. We are giving information and education. Should you wish to go further with diagnosis or treatment, please reach out to him and his team at Synapse. This is going to be at officialsynapse.com, and get established as a patient so that, one, you can have doctor-patient confidentiality, but also, that's just the proper thing to do, the ethical thing to do. Today we're doing education. The question that we have is about medication, and I'm going to let Dr. Troy weigh in on this. So I'm out of my levothyroxine and won't be able to get more for 2 weeks. What natural items can I use until then?
So it's a great question. Iodine is the natural item that makes up your thyroid. So there are a lot of iodine type supplements. So usually they'll be labeled with like something like Thyroid Pro. So there'll be iodine with tyrosine in
Mhm.
there. And a lot of times, yeah, they also have glandulars in there. Now, glandulars you can't really regulate things specifically, but if you really notice a difference off of your levo and you're going to be out, you can actually take these supplements to keep you afloat, so to speak. And a lot of people will actually be able to curb any type of negative setback from not getting their thyroid medication. So anything that's iodine based, it'll say something along the lines too of Thyroid Pro if it's got some of the other markers in there, and some of the other material in there that's very beneficial. The thyroid requires iodine, magnesium, some B vitamins, vitamin D, and so a lot of these supplements will have a combination of all those things in there. And then sometimes if it's just glandular, that works all by itself. So yeah, there's a lot you can do. I've had patients for years react to some of their thyroid medication because a couple of the thyroid medications, not levothyroxine, but a couple of them actually have gluten in them. And so some of my gluten intolerant autoimmune thyroid patients couldn't tolerate the medication. So we had to use natural
Mm,
support to actually keep them afloat until we could address the gluten issue. Or by the time we got it fixed, they didn't need the medication or the natural
interesting.
stuff. So
I think we have a good candidate for somebody who might actually need to come in to see you. This is Jane Jetson um, on Rumble, okay, and she's super frustrated. Spent thousands of dollars going to different places, allopathic doctors to no avail. We need help. My husband has been sick for over 10 years. He's been diagnosed with valley fever, Lyme disease, co-infections, and more. The local infectious disease doctor fired him. Too many symptoms. Super frustrated. I can hear it in your voice, Jane.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay. So this is one of the most complex things we're seeing a lot of right now. And I'm going to say
Mhm.
it this way. So what we know of, I'm going to use AIDS as an example. AIDS or HIV, the virus, downregulates a part of our immune system, and you get what's called acquired immune deficiency syndrome. So you're basically the AIDS virus downregulates your immune system response to fight other infections. And that's when people with AIDS, that's why they struggle and suffer. Uh, COVID does the same thing. And if some people may remember that the Luc Montagnier, the French immunologist who won the PhD for his
Mhm.
study and research on AIDS, came out and said he found a fraction of the HIV virus encoded within the COVID virus, and they labeled it a conspiracy or whatever. But we are seeing that same thing as far as the downregulation of part of our immune system. Lyme does the same thing. So COVID, Lyme, and HIV all work the same as far as what it does to downregulate your immune system. So a lot of traditional doctors get very frustrated because in order for you to overcome this, you have to empower the immune system to fight all infections because all you're going to be doing is chasing your tail. So it is a very, very tricky balance and it is very expensive. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's a lot of lab testing and a lot of course correction along the way, and it takes a while. We have had a lot of success recently because of COVID with our Lyme patients by doing this is what you have to do. You have to kill off the current infection, but as soon as you do that, it doesn't die and go away. It goes into a cystic form, it hides inside your cell. Then you have to improve the intracellular immune mechanism, which is zinc dependent. And so to do that, you have to make sure your sleep is doing fine, your digestion is doing fine, because that's all your stomach acid and your zinc is a part of it. So you have to get that mechanism restored, which has almost always been compromised by the infection in the first place. So restoring their sleep and digestive system function while killing off an active infection, which just drives it into cystic form, then inducing and going after the cystic form, which we now know ivermectin and other antimalarial, antiparasitic medications and nutrients do. But when they go in after and elicit the actual Lyme hiding inside the cell, it'll kick it out of the cell, and then your immune system has to be there to then pick it up. But that's what's downregulated by the Lyme.
Mhm.
So you have to be doing something to upregulate that. Now, we found Ace Mannin and a few other things are actively doing that. We have technologies and things that here locally that boost the immune system response. So that's what we want to teach a lot of the other countries, because truthfully, we would get overwhelmed just with the Lyme stuff. And it's so expensive to get the testing done and to course correct. It's very complicated. We have discerned through it where we're having successes. I have a patient testimonial. She was suicidal in bed 90% of the time, and she is now working full time. She's doing great. She has
Wow.
95% of function back, a little bit of brain fog still, but it requires there's an art and a dance to this right now, because we understand the mechanisms though, but we've got to clean up all of the problems. And one of the things that actually destroys the part of the immune system that's supposed to take it away, once the inside of the cell, like ivermectin, displaces it, that mechanism basically gets destroyed with Lyme, like we said, with COVID, and with inflammation. So if you have inflammation from your diet, you're not going to be able to make ground. So that's why there's a whole component of improving your digestive system, your sleep system, your stress system, your anti-inflammatory system, while you're upregulating the immune response. So I know, long-winded answer, but I pray that you guys find a solution. We know how to do it, but it's not
Yeah.
the level of frustration I get 100%.
One of the things that I will say to weigh in here, that I think you're not forgetting this, Troy, but I think that people um, need to know is that you have a gift from God. You have a gift of wisdom and discernment. You have a way of you have an intuition that is very helpful. And it's hard to explain that, but for example, somebody who's frustrated having gone to this and this and this and this place, first of all, when you're in that legacy quote healthcare system, um, they tend to be very compartmentalized,
Yeah.
and they don't have a lot of crossover knowledge or understanding. What I've seen with Dr. Troy is that not only does he have a broad understanding and a experience level with a number of things, but that he has the wisdom that only can come from God. There's a level of revelation and wisdom that he brings to his practice, and his team does. And you can't really put a price tag on that, because it brings about it just you've got God's wisdom
Yeah.
solving the problem, and that's very hard to quantify, but it's very real. And so, you know, if I were you, I can tell you're really, really frustrated, Jane. I would pray about this, and if you feel led to reach out to Dr. Troy and his team, just understand that that's the basis on which they bring healing into people's lives. That's the backbone of what they do in their practice and how they make decisions and solve problems. It's really key.
Yeah, well,
So
I agree. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom, and so that's
yeah,
operating from that helps us with our decision making for sure.
yeah,
And I do know
yeah.
that for every problem, God has a solution,
Hmm.
and so it
Hmm.
may not be on the timeline that we want, but continuing to look for that solution, God will light your path
Yeah,
along the way. So
yeah,
just
yeah.
hang in there, because I do know
Um,
how challenging that is.
Yes. Okay, Judy has a question about salt, and we've been having a little discussion on Facebook about this. I What salt do we eat? First of all, we do need salt. I like Redmond's salt, Redmond's real salt, and then I also like the gray sea salt, the sel de marin, and that is from the coast of France normally.
Yeah.
And when you get it and you open the bag, it's kind of wet. That's a fantastic salt, very full of minerals. She said, "I'm confused because I think we've been lied to about the pink Himalayan salt." Do you have any input on that?
No, it's not that we've been lied to. It's just that the ocean, has more of the minerals that we need in general. So I'm a huge fan of the Celtic sea salt and sea salt in general. Now, I also used to say Himalayan salt. Now, the salt that they use for regular table salt in the United States in particular, people are so iodine deficient, they put iodine in that salt, but it's not the right form of
Mhm.
iodine. In the sea salt, there's iodine in there because iodine comes from the ocean. It comes from the sea. Especially if you grew up in the Midwest or the middle of the country and there's no sea around you, you don't get a lot of iodine in the food because the only way that happens is when the ocean, the waters basically go on the beach and then the mist goes up in the air, it'll go inward a certain amount of time and then land on the farm fields. So most of the farm fields in mid Canada and Midwest United States are iodine deficient. So that's why, especially in the Midwest, you need the Celtic sea salt because a lot of us are iodine deficient. Also, when you have radiation, like when the nuclear reactor basically went off in Japan, what did they give the entire west coast of Canada and California and the United States? Iodine pills,
Iodine.
because radiation basically reduces iodine. So iodine is really one of the key components when it comes to the sea salt. So that's why I like the sea salt in particular. Himalayan still has value. So there's still a lot of minerals, but we have more minerals that can be readily used that we're deficient in. And iodine is the number one worldwide deficiency. And so that's why for me the sea salt just kind of trumps everything else. And Himalayan salt still has some health value, especially as related to like table salt, because it's just a lot. It's not processed as much. There's a lot more natural components to it, so there's still a lot of value there. But because of all of the manufacturing and a lot of the um, toxicity in the world, actually the mountainous region salt actually can sometimes come with some other toxin components. We're learning a lot more with that. So I tell people to stick with the sea salt as much as possible.
Excellent. Thank you for explaining that. I do like the sea salt. We have a quick question from. It's not quick for her, but it's intense. Jackie says, "My husband is 71. He has Parkinson's. What should we do?" I will say that I interviewed a lady named Mimi. She is on X. I think she's 70 or 71. She was on her deathbed. I mean, she was very sick. She had a stroke. She had Parkinson's, all kinds of medication, went carnivore, and she has a really good channel. She's a good, communicator, great communicator. I did interview her. Her interview is on my Facebook and on my Rumble. But reach out to me at my email, info@marygracemedia.com. I will send you that interview. I'll send you her information. But also, Dr. Troy, what you wanna weigh in here?
Yeah. So they call Parkinson's Alzheimer's toxic cousin. So basically, it's an area of the brain called the substantia nigra, and it's very dopamine dependent. So it depends on whether or not you still are making dopamine or not. So carnivore can be very helpful, and carnivore actually causes a paradoxical reaction in the body. So it causes oxidative stress. So all this, the antioxidant revolution, which is a real thing, it does the exact opposite. It triggers oxidation, which we've been told for 20 years is a bad thing. But what ends up happening is a rebound effect where our own cells start to learn to react, basically, and start to take over function again. Kind of like what Trump is doing with the countries,
Mhm.
where he's being aggressive, and then they're stepping up and doing their own thing again. That's what the
Yeah.
carnivore diet is doing. Now, there's another thing that just came out. Pierre Corey actually published this, and he published that we need to be looking at chlorine dioxide, which is
Mm.
banned from use right now. Chlorine dioxide does the exact same thing as a carnivore diet without changing your diet. And I happen to know some studies and research that is going on. There were Parkinsonian patients whose tremors went away while they're going through the study and research on the chlorine dioxide. And I do think there's something there. I do think we are going to see a change where they're going to allow future research to increase with the chlorine dioxide and see what's behind it. Right now, they've put a kibosh on that, but President Trump got beat up for some of the comments he said about bleach and other things like that. And there's reasons for that. But we've actually seen mechanisms of reversal of degenerative chronic neurologic diseases using things like this. Carnivore, there's a ton of evidence, and carnivore and the chlorine dioxide, the mechanisms are very much the same, but you can actually dose it or control a little bit more with the chlorine dioxide. But unfortunately, that's not just readily available to everyone right now. They
Mhm.
do use it for, like, when you're camping, to kill off all of the bugs in the waters to make water clean. So it does exist, but to actually for treatment stuff that is pending and going to be coming out quite soon, I think, within the next 2 years.
That's the water purification tablets, is that what okay.
Well, no,
Interesting.
it's not. It's actually, when you actually look at it, it's actually, you mix two things together. They're using water purification, but when you mix the two components together, it's
Oh,
actually
okay.
the gas that's created. It mimics chemotherapy, actually, but it doesn't damage the healthy cells like chemotherapy does. So it's
Interesting.
very
Okay.
fascinating research, and I do think that it's going to be something that comes to light, and they're going to, when they start allowing research, because they started in the '70s, and there was so much great stuff that came out, and then it got squashed, like a lot of good things.
Right, right, yeah. Do we have time for one more question?
Sure, one more, yes,
Okay, this is a big one, and I think this is Jackie on Facebook. For some reason, it's not showing up in the feed here, but it's on my page. Um, Hopefully you're still here. My 24-year-old daughter was diagnosed at 17 with CIRS, Sears
yep,
chronic EBV MTFHR mutation, then had COVID 5 times while in college.
yeah,
She did not take the shot, then diagnosed with POTS, Ehlers-Danlos, chronic fatigue. She gets Myers cocktail, multiple supplements, plus propranolol and midodrine to control heart rate and circulation to help prevent frequently passing out. Do you have any suggestions to improve her immune system and fatigue? Get to Minnesota right away
yeah.
and go to Dr. Troy's clinic.
100%. So we have treated hundreds of patients with this exact scenario, and it's complex, like the Lyme patient I just said. SIRS is chronic inflammatory response syndrome that comes from mold. So it's basically a part of your own immune system starts to release these inflammatory reactions to mold. So people like this, when you have the genetics for the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and the MTHFR, you can't get rid of mold spores. So they're called biotoxins. You can't get rid of them as efficiently as other people can. So if you walk into one moldy building, then it can set you back for months. It dysregulates the actual mycotoxin, comes into the brain and attaches to leptin receptors are on the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus regulates our fight or flight response, so it'll actually drop their blood pressure really quickly. So it's a heavy lift. There's a lot to do, but you have to you have to avoid mold as much as possible. You have to use binders. A lot of times they use the medication CSM, which is an anti-cholesterol medication, but it's a strong binder. I like to use more natural binders, and then make sure there's no mold in the environment, and then start to work on the brain and the gut. You have to change the gut. The POTS won't go away. And I'll just say this, there's a lot to it, but this scenario will induce infections in the GI tract because the immune system gets downregulated. It will induce a B1 deficiency. And there's a great book called Dysautonomia. And it was written by a medical doctor in the UK who did his research on vaccine injuries. Now, this is all the same thing. Mold is right there with Lyme and COVID as far as how it can affect the immune system, but it'll also dysregulate your sleep system and your hormones. So there are very, very few doctors around the country that are certified in this. We were at one point, I think we still are the only clinic in Minnesota that's certified in it when it comes to this part of it. But since COVID, we've seen a whole bunch of this because, again, COVID weakens the already weakened scenario that was created by SIRS. It's the same as Lyme as far as the treatment, but it's mold and mycotoxins instead of the actual bacteria of Lyme. So very challenging. And just that at that age too, I just pray for these young people to be lifted up. And I will say this, I've been actively speaking to a radio show here locally, Faith Radio. It's the Susie Larson's. She's a nationally known author and does a lot of Bible studies. Works with her. She had the exact same scenario, and so I was able to help her through that process. So I encourage people to look into her story, her history, all of her books. She came in. Her husband used to have to carry her in, and now she does 50-mile bike rides, and she's just an amazingly miraculous woman. So woman of faith. So her stuff is just brilliant. So she had the exact same scenario.
Well, there you go. And so hopefully Jackie is listening, but I put the link in the chat there. So glad I saw that question. I think we have been talking for quite a long time, and Dr. Troy is so generous with his time. I really, really appreciate it. We have so many good questions from our listeners.
I have one last comment because Mike Stoll says on here, chlorine dioxide can be very dangerous, and he's right. So I don't want people to do it. What I was saying is there's research about dosing and how it can
Okay.
be done properly. So he's right about that. I just wanted there's a lot of research out
Okay.
there. So I'm not telling people
Okay.
to go do that. Carnivore is safe. And so just stick with that. So he's bang on with
Okay.
that. But when we actually study it more and can discern through it, which I can tell you is happening, and we're seeing breakthroughs in how to manage it, but don't do it by yourself, because he's exactly
Okay,
right with that. So I
good.
want you to hear that.
Yeah, and Dr. Pierre Corey has a Substack, that you can follow, I think. For those of you
Yeah.
who don't know, Substack is like another platform. I post on there a lot. I have a Substack. It's marygracemedia.substack.com. And I post videos. If you miss my videos here, you can go there and I post the replays a couple days later. So if you're tired of the ads on Rumble, you can go over there. And so that is where you can find him as well. It's his last name, I think, is spelled Khoury. There's a different Pierre Corey that's more of a mainstream doctor. And if you Google it and you get the spelling wrong, you're going to be
Yeah.
like, who's this guy?
Right.
Pierre Corey he's South African. So look for the accent. Because that's who you're looking for. Dr. Troy Spurrill, where can people find you? And how can they, how can they get in touch? I'm putting it right up here.
Yeah, go to our website, and if you're looking for information, we do have a free discovery call as a patient. We're also looking for practitioners who want a foundational kingdom business model for functional and nutritional, the blend of both worlds, or what we are calling, it's a new healthcare system model. So we're looking for any and all involvement. Even if you're a solo practitioner or wanting to learn, let us know, because we are organizing people to be able to come into community who are meant to be helping in the healing process. There's a huge component of trauma that people are going to be needing to overcome, which we have a process for that. So just go to our website, officialsynapse.com, and we have a lot of information there. So I'm very,
Good.
very, very thankful for you, Mary, and yeah, God bless
Thankful for
everyone.
you
Just keep
too. Yeah.
going. This is amazing.
Excellent. And everybody, please remember to share this. If you're on Rumble, hit the thumb under the video, the thumbs up, because when you do that and when you come back for the replay and you leave comments, that really helps to get it up in the algorithm after the fact. Please also know that, especially on Rumble, if you see comments from somebody pretending to be Mary Grace or the Mary Grace Show or Mary Grace Media, if you don't see the green verification badge next to the name, it is a scam. Please do not click on any links in any of my feed. If it's not from my verified channel, I recommend that you never click links. These are spam, they're viruses, et cetera, et cetera. Please be very careful about that. I won't come at you in the chat. I will, if you leave a comment and I reply, maybe I'll do that sometimes, but don't do that. If you want to reach me directly, go to info@marygracemedia.com, and then you'll know for sure that it's me messaging you. Please be careful about that. There's a lot more of that coming out right now. For some reason, I have my guesses, but just be careful. And come back for our next show. Please get on the mailing list so that you can get on You can get notifications for future interviews, marygracemedia.com, and we will send out notices when we do these types of interviews and any interview. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Go outside, touch some grass, and look at the sky, and get the sunshine on your face, and put down your device for a while. Everybody have a great day, and we will see you back here soon on the Mary Grace Show. Thank you again, Dr. Troy Spurrill.
Yeah.